So now I'm excited to introduce our host, Dr. Marty Martin. Dr. Marty Martin is a licensed clinical psychologist, former HR executive, and now professor at DePaul in the Driehaus College of Business. He has published more than 100 refereed articles and 3 books. His clinical and coaching practices leverage his education in behavioral sleep medicine. Marty attended the University of Glasgow and is one of the few sleep psychologists in the nation focusing on workplace performance and wellness. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Martin.
All righty, thank you so much. So it's good to be with you all virtually. And I want to talk just very briefly about how I got interested in sleep. So it wasn't one of those things when I was a little kid and people said, hey, what do you want to do? And I said, oh, behavioral sleep medicine. I didn't even know what that was. But after I graduated college and I was working in the Washington, D.C. area, I had the misfortune of being in an automobile accident. So I got hit head on, had to go to the hospital, car was totaled, and I got hit by a drowsy driver. 3 months after that, I was on a train going from Washington, D.C. to Hampton, Virginia. Train derailed. And then I got thrown around, again, back in the hospital. And then about 2 months after that, I found out is the train engineer had sleep apnea, but was non-compliant with those CPAP machines. So I said, in a period of like 3 months, is I've wound up in the hospital because it's something to do with sleep. So it really got me really fascinated about sleep and kind of sleep and work. So I've prepared for you kind of a presentation and with a lot of practical tips. So I want to make sure that there's some good practical tips for you. And I'm going to break it up into sections. So when I'm going to pause from section 1 to section 2 and 3 and 4. And when I pause, I think that's a great time for you to put in any questions that you have, any criticisms that you have, any comments that you want to make. And you'll get the deck, so don't have to write furiously unless that's the way that you actually learn better. So it's stress, sleep, and performance. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is really sleep 101. Then I'm going to talk about sleep to perform, and then it's more than sleep, it's also time of day. So let's begin with sleep 101. So when you think about sleep, is these 3 symbols relate to what's the best way to sleep. So fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up at a time that's natural. So let me go over the first one, the balloon. So the balloon is this. So I'm an early morning person. I'm up by 5:30. So right now it's close to 6 p.m. So I'm a little bit tired, a little bit fatigued because I've been up now for close to 13 hours. So I've been up for 13 hours. So when I first woke up, my balloon was flat, which means there was no sleep debt. So then by noon, my balloon got a little bit bigger. So now I've been up for 13 hours, so my balloon is pretty full. So usually I go to bed between 9:30 and 10. So 9:30 and 10, my balloon is going to be really full. So in order for you to go to sleep, you have to accumulate sleep debt. And you accumulate that sleep debt over time. So if you woke up, let's say at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you try to go to bed at 9 o'clock, your balloon, your sleep debt would not be completely full. But maybe by 12, it's fuller, and maybe by 2, it's even fuller. So you really have to remember that is you have to accumulate sleep debt because then that helps you get sleepy. The more physically active you are, the more cognitively active you are, then the balloon rises. So that's one thing to remember about sleep 101. Second thing is that clock. So we all have a chronotype. So a chronotype is something that is genetic. So I'm an early morning person. You might be in the middle between early morning and night owl. So for my chronotype as an early morning person, I ideally need to be in the bed between about 9:30 and 11, because that's the right time based on my chronotype to fall asleep. Like if I try to go to bed right now, I may toss and turn. Or if I go to bed after 12, you would think, well, you should just like fall out. But no, because I've passed my sleep window. So again, number 1, the balloon, you got to accumulate that sleep debt. Number 2, we all have an ideal sleep window based on our chronotype. And the next one is the gear shift. So let's imagine you're running around, for work, and then you're on this webinar, and then maybe you got to do some dinner, you have to do something else, and then you just jump in the bed. So if you jump in the bed after you've been running around a lot, you're probably not going to fall asleep because you have to dial down, you have to wind down. So imagine if you have a toddler that's 2 to 3 years old. You don't throw them in the bed and expect them to fall asleep instantly. So there's a wind down ritual. Maybe there's a bath, or maybe there's a story, or maybe there's a light snack, or whatever it might be, is to gradually bring them down. So if you really want to increase the probability that you sleep well, is accumulate sleep debt. Be busy, be active. Make sure you go at the right time for you and consistently every day of the week, even the weekends, and find a wind down ritual. Oops, went too fast. So this just shows you the balloon. So when I wake up at 5 in the morning, the balloon is flaccid. So then it gets a little bit filled up, let's say around noon, then around 3 and around 9 is very full. So that's the sleep debt. So you'll notice in the presentation, I put these key takeaways. So this is the first one. Fill your balloon, sleep debt, go to bed at the right time in consistent time, and enact your dial down ritual. So this is a little bit busy, but I'm going to explain it to you because this explains 2 mechanisms that enable us to go to sleep. So let's look at process S on the top. So that process S is that sleep debt that I was telling you about the balloon. So when you wake up, you don't have much sleep debt. And then as the day progresses till about 9 p.m., you have a lot of sleep debt. And if you went to sleep at 9 p.m., then your sleep debt decreases while you're sleeping. And then when you wake up, minimum sleep debt. So that's one thing that you need to go to sleep. The other is process C. Process C is circadian or light. So 9 a.m. when you wake up is the sun is up. So the sun is going to alert you. A light is going to alert you. And let's say it gets dark around 9, then just it being dark, then melatonin is triggered, then that initiates sleep. So you need the sleep debt, and you also need darkness as well. So if you've got darkness, if you've got sleep debt, then you have a very high probability that you will fall asleep easier than if you don't. So remember those 2 things. So get the right amount of sleep at the right time for you. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions or comments before I move to sleep to perform. Anything showing up yet, or?
I don't see anything right now at the moment. And
Okay.
As Dr. Martin said, if you have any questions, oh, wait, we have something. Oh, it's okay. Here we are. Someone said they were sorry to hear about your multiple accidents and concussions in the past. Do you think when practical corporations should accommodate this person's sleep chronotypes in terms of standard workday hours?
Absolutely. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So the ideal that employers ought to do is have you take a chronotype assessment, and then I'll give you my email, and then if you send me your, say, hey, I'd like the chronotype assessment, I can send it to you. Because for me, I'm better suited. My peak hours are from 5:30 till about 1. And then I hit the afternoon slump from 1 to 3. Then I get a second rebound that goes from about 3:30 to about 7:30. Then I'm done after that. So it would be best that my work schedule is aligned with my chronotype. However, a lot of people that are night owls, they suffer because they may naturally get sleepy like 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. But if they've got a 9 to 5 job, then they get up at 7:30. But recognize they may have fallen asleep at 2. So they're only getting 5 hours of sleep. If you get less than 6 hours of sleep a night, it's called short sleep duration syndrome. It's bad for your health. It's bad for performance. It's bad for productivity. It's bad for everything. But a lot of night owls suffer through that because the schedules are not aligned with their chronotype. Now, it's not always possible depending on what you do, But if you really want to drive higher performance, higher health, higher well-being, fewer accidents and mistakes, I think that's a great recommendation, is that employers ought to do that. Think about Chernobyl. And if you think about Exxon Valdez, in all instances, the workers fell asleep. Right. Anything else?
Nope, that was it so far.
All right. So let's go to sleep to perform. So that question was a nice segue into this. So if you don't sleep well for one night, so let's say last night you slept less than 5 hours, just one night, you're going to have impaired decision-making, information processing, impaired creativity, impaired adaptability. You won't be able to control your emotions as well, and you're going to inhibit your learning just from one bad night of sleep. Just one bad night of sleep. So you cannot catch up on your sleep. If you don't sleep well last night, that night and the following day are gone forever. You don't catch up on it. So don't think that, oh, I'm going to catch up on the weekend. No, because the damage has been done. So if you really think about this is, wow, that's powerful, is if I only sleep 5.5, 6 hours, all these problematic things will impact my performance the next day, not 10 years from now, but the next day. So you really want to make sure that you prioritize sleep. But it's a challenge because we have family commitments and social commitments and work commitments. And in a lot of cases, we don't feel comfortable saying no, or we can't say no. We can't put boundaries. So what we do is we cut our sleep. But you may cut your sleep, but think about the impact that happens the next day. Now, these are some key health problems reported by sleep-deprived employees, not from one day, but if you are chronically not able to sleep for about a year, you may manifest any of these symptoms, not all of them, but we all have our weak spots. So for some people, headaches and migraines, some people, anxiety and panic attacks, some people, cold, viruses and associated symptoms, that's me. Some people, poor vision, some people, back pain, some people, stomach aches or GI symptoms, some people, increased appetite. And more research is coming out that sleep is an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease, like cholesterol, like high blood pressure, like diabetes, like your BMI. So it's an independent risk factor. So more and more cardiologists, when they're screening people to do prevention on stroke as well as heart attacks, are beginning to inquire about sleep and making sure that people have high quality sleep and enough sleep. So the American Academy of Sleep Medicine recommends that an adult have 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. So 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. So now let's think about not the health effects, but the relationship between stress and performance. So if you will note, I have calm and eustress and distress. So eustress is good stress. So there's a psychiatrist, way back by the name of Hans Selye. And he said that there's 2 types of stress. There's the eustress, the good stress. So you win the lotto, you got a promotion, you got a raise. You feel very good about something that happened at work. Maybe your son or daughter graduated. You had a great time celebrating Mother's Day, whatever it is. So all of that is eustress. And then you also have distress. So maybe a fight with a colleague, a fight with a neighbor. You're underperforming. You're getting ready to get fired. You hate your job. You hate your neighborhood. You're just, consumed with rising gas prices. So that's distress. So if you look at performance, is optimal performance, we have to have a certain amount of stress. Because if there's no stress, then we don't really have any energy or motivation to do anything. But each one of us, that peak differs. And they call it the zone of optimal performance or the zone of optimal functioning. So it's very important for you to be able to reflect in, what's that zone of optimal performance or that zone of optimal functioning for me where I'm at my peak? Now, here's the connection between the stress and the sleep. If you got 5 hours of sleep last night, you're not going to be calm And you're not going to be at the very peak of eustress. You're going to be distressed. Maybe not completely distressed, but a little bit distressed. So that's where the sleep stress performance equation comes in. So here's my definition of stress. And you may want to jot this down. So it's when demands exceed resources. So let's look at two types of demands. So one demand is intrinsic to you. So if you're a control freak, maybe, or you're a perfectionist, or you have high standards about everything, then you are self-imposing a demand on yourself. The other type of demand is external. So maybe your boss, or maybe your loved one, or maybe your son or daughter, or for some people, society, if you will, they may have certain expectations. So if the demands are too high internally or externally, and if they're higher than the resources, you're going to experience stress. So let's look at resources. So you have external resources and internal resources, like you have external demands and internal demands. So external resources are things such as maybe a vacation, maybe a holiday, maybe you go to the spa. It's things that are external to you. Internal resources are maybe it's meditation, maybe it's prayer, maybe it's just walking, maybe it's petting your dog, whatever it might be. Maybe it's positive thinking, or maybe it's like dancing to music, whatever, exercising. So when you think about that equation, stress occurs when our demands are greater than our resources, and on both sides you have the internal, external. That should give you some information about what you need to do to maybe lessen some stress in your life. So here's the question. So where does sleep fall in that equation? Sleep is a resource. Sleep is an internal resource. So if you get enough sleep and high quality sleep, that's a resource. And as a resource, what it can do is lessen stress. The other side is this. If you are sleep deprived chronically, then you are imposing an internal demand upon yourself. If you'll remember, I'm going to go back to this slide. All of those, if you have reduced decision-making, creativity, adaptability, that's going to make things more demanding. So this is where sleep comes into the equation. Sleep is important because if you don't get enough, it could be a demand. And if you get too little, it could be a demand. And if you get high quality sleep, and not just high quality sleep, but you get enough sleep, 7 to 9 hours, then it is an internal resource. So some of you may be able to relate to this. So you're overwhelmed, stressed out, plate is full. Plate is so full that you really are not going to prioritize sleep. So if you decide to do that, they may work for a couple of days, but over time, remember is if you have chronic lack of sleep, you're increasing the demands. You're making the situation worse on a long-term basis. So let's look at what disturbs sleep quality. So I mentioned one of them, which is stress. The other are physical disruptors. So I'll share with you kind of a story. I'm working with a client right now and gave her a sleep diary. And what I noticed is, is the time that she goes to sleep during the weekend is very different from the work week. So on the work week, typically she's in the bed 10:30, she typically falls asleep at 11. On the weekends, she's in the bed 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning, falls asleep 3 to 4. So that difference is a 5-hour difference. And you do not want more than a 1 to 2 hour difference between work week and weekend, because it's the equivalent of you flying to another country and you don't have jet lag, but you have social jet lag. So my first recommendation to her was, let's try to get your work week sleep routine and your weekend sleep routine kind of closer together, 1 to 2 hours, not 4 to 5 hours. The other thing that I noticed after I gave her the sleep diary is that she would wake up 2 to 3 times each night. And then there's a little piece there that says, well, why are you waking up? And for her, it was the neighbors. The neighbors are making noise. So it wasn't to urinate, she wasn't cold, she wasn't hot, but it was the neighbors. And it wasn't light. So now what we're working on is some noise reduction, some other things, such that the neighbors can be quiet. So it's important to note is that there could be a number of things that impact sleep quality, including substances as well. So for some people, coffee won't bother them. I can drink an espresso in the bed and I'm still going to fall asleep. So I don't smoke, so I can't really say anything about that. But you really have to listen to your body. So maybe your last cup of coffee ought to be 9 hours before you intend to go to bed. The thing about alcohol is this, is alcohol will initially make you sleepy, but it interrupts your sleep later in the evening. So your sleep quality is not as great, but it does help you fall asleep. And if you drink like a lot of beer and it's a lot of liquid, then you may actually get up in the night because you have to go to the bathroom. The other thing too is with alcohol is it dries your mouth out. So some people, what they find is they got dry mouth and they go drink water and they got to urinate. So you just want to kind of look at what your pattern happens to be. So key takeaway, lower your demands and increase your resources. So that's related to the wind down ritual that I told you about. It's also related to where sleep comes into the equation. So I'm going to pause there and then see if there are any comments or questions about stress and the relationship between stress and sleep.
One thing, someone said that that they're 5 months pregnant, and it's very interesting and less than ideal to see how the hormones and extra demands on your bladder affect your sleep pattern. Can you speak to that? Is it anything?
Yeah. So I would, you want to be careful because you definitely don't want to be dehydrated before you go to bed. So, but you don't want to drink a lot of high volume liquids. So it's getting hot outside right now. So sometimes what you want to do is take little sips. So that way you're kind of moistening your mouth, but you're not filling up your bladder. The other piece too is that with pregnancy, it's not uncommon that you may wake up more frequently. So if that's the case is there's something what I call the 20-minute rule. So let's say you wake up and then you find yourself not falling asleep for 30 minutes. So a lot of people will just toss and turn in the bed for hours. It could be 2 hours. And then they're getting frustrated and agitated. And as they're getting frustrated and agitated, they're getting more stimulated, which means that wind down is not there. So they're fighting against themselves. So I would encourage you to practice what I call the 20-minute rule. It's this. So for anybody, whether you're pregnant or not, so you wake up in the middle of the night, maybe you have to go to the bathroom, maybe you're cold for whatever reason. If you can't fall back to sleep within 20 or 30 minutes, get out of the bed, get out of the bedroom, unless you live in the studio, and then go somewhere and, sit down or lay down that's dark. Because remember, make sure it's dark so you trigger the melatonin, and then just stay there until you get sleepy. So, but you have to know the difference between sleepy and tired. And I will often ask people is, what's the difference between being sleepy and being tired? And people will say it's the same. Well, actually, it's not the same, because if you watch, let's say, a 4 or 5 year old, so when they get sleepy, what do? They do this with their eyes, and then they lose motor control of their head, or they're looking at you and their eyes are blinking, or they may lean over. So loss of muscle control anywhere in your body, in your head, kind of blinking of the eyes, people doing this. Occasionally, for some people, I hate to say it's a little bit gross, so maybe a little bit of saliva dripping out the side of your mouth. All of those are indications that you're sleepy and not tired. So the 20 to 30-minute rule is out the bed, out the bedroom, go in another room, make sure it's dark. Do not go back into the bedroom, the bed, until you are sleepy, not tired. So then once you're sleepy, then there'll be a high probability you'll fall back to sleep. The other piece of that is make sure that if you go to the other room is you don't turn this on, because if it was darker, this will emit a blue light. And if it emits a blue light, then what it's going to do is it's going to suppress melatonin, because from your brain's point of view, this light is saying, oh, it's daylight, wake up. It's daylight, wake up. If you remember the process C. So no blue light, no blue computer light, no blue light. Some people get like calm and headspace, which is fine. So the music is relaxing, but they have this light. So now their brain is completely confused. It's like, what do you want me to do? Like, do you want to relax or do you want me to wake up? You want to go to sleep or you want me to wake up? So use just like a regular lamp or put on something that's soothing. The other thing too is when you do the 20, 30 minute rule, don't do anything that stimulates you. So nothing that makes you angry or like super, super happy. Something that's kind of boring and neutral. So someone wrote, is blue light, what was that question about the blue light?
It says, is the blue light effect better or worse from cell phones versus laptops versus TVs?
Laptops and cell phones are the same. It's less for TV, but you still don't want to do the TV. Here's the other thing about TV. So the thing about TV that you don't have for cell phones and devices is if there's a commercial. Because if you notice is, say the sound of the program is like this. Whenever there's a commercial, you get an increase in volume. And then after the commercial, it drops. So with each commercial, you get another increase in volume. So say there's 7 commercials before the next segment. So the program, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, boom. So you notice that even while you're sleeping. So some people may fall asleep to the TV, and that's okay. But if you have this constant up and down, then you actually are processing that during at least 2 phases of sleep. So you want to be careful about the television for both the light, but it's not as bad as this, as well as the auditory.
And someone wanted to know, does coffee affect your quality sleep?
It depends upon the person. So for some people, not at all. And for others, yes. So for some people, how it impacted, if you drink coffee too close to bed and it's not digested properly, you could get reflux. So some people get reflux here. Then for others is within their stomach, there could be a little bit of gurgling and a little bit of pain. And if you put milk, and some people may be lactose intolerant, they could have a little upset stomach. And for those that may be a little bit like jittery, then they really can't quite wind down because they're a little bit jittery. So kind of listen to your body. And sometimes it's good to obey your body. Although sometimes our mind says, forget you, body, I just want to do what I want to do. But usually your body wins every time.
And someone wanted to go back really quick. Your thoughts on one sleep chronotype being prized over the others. For example, early birds get the worm.
It's a myth. Yep. Okay. However, I will say this, in like a 9 to 5 schedule, early birds and intermediate types are at an advantage and night owls that are a disadvantage. And if it's knowledge work and the work doesn't have to be done according to a certain thing, I think increasingly we need just to remove some of those hourly restrictions. So if you have a team of 10 people and 2 are night owls and say they're programmers, they can do anything at any point in time. Let them, if they want to start working at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and they finish up at 11 o'clock at night, as long as they're hitting their deliverables and they're staying up to date and they're communicating, why not? Because they're going to be less stressed, have higher well-being, and be more productive than literally dragging themselves in at 9 o'clock and then for the first 3 hours just struggling. And then by the time they're like super productive, it's like, okay, time to leave. So their best hours are off the clock.
Gotcha. And I think that's everything for now. And this recording will
All right.
be shared.
So now let's go to this next section. So it's more than sleep, it's time of day too. All right. So for all of us, regardless of our chronotype, I'm showing one for intermediates, and I'm also showing one here for the early birds. But regardless of your chronotype, we all have these stages of the day. Why? Because of circadian rhythms. It's all genetic. So for all of us, the start of the day, some of us are slow to rise, some are not, is typically in the morning up to maybe, it could be anywhere between 11 and 1 is when you hit your peak. So this really is the time here for decision-making tasks, problem-solving tasks, analytical tasks, focused work tasks, the time for you to really give a great impression, to be on your game interpersonally. So that's here. The slump here, the afternoon slump, could be anywhere between 12 and 3, depending upon the person. So this is the time for what I call administrivia. So routine work, stuff that's low stakes, low consequences. If you make a mistake, so what? Kind of like so-so interactions. Like checking up on emails, things that are a little bit more administrative. And then, depending upon the person, this could be like 2:30 to 4. Then you have the recovery period towards the end of the day. The recovery period is the time for creative work, for brainstorming work, for collaborative work, for insightful work. So if you note these stages of the day, you really want to make sure that as much as you have the control to do it, is you're reserving certain tasks for certain stages of the day. And if you do that, what you will find is your performance will increase, your productivity will increase, you will be more efficient, and you'll be less stressed because you're working with your circadian rhythm, not working against your circadian rhythm. So let's take a look at this. So most productive time of the day by percentage. So if you note here, we have midnight to 7 a.m. and here we have midnight to 7 a.m. So if this curve really begins at midnight, so that's accounting for some of the night owls. And then for a lot of us, it goes up here. So you can see how it comes down here. So it really does depend upon where you are. So it's important for you to know what your curve looks like. So my curve is not the orange curve. My curve is more of this blue curve, but my peak would really start to come up here a little bit earlier, and then it would go to about here. So one of the good things to do is to track your energy level and your focus level like every hour while you're awake for about 4 or 5 days. So you're tracking your energy level and your focus level every hour over about 4 or 5 days, then you'll be able to plot out when you have the highest focus and energy, and that will give you some information about when you should do work. Because a lot of times we focus on the why, the where, the what, the how, but I want to focus on the when too. So now this looks at emotional balance. So can you keep your composure and your cool? So again, for most of us, what happens is we wake up, and as we wake up, it peaks at anywhere between like 12 and 1. Then we hit the afternoon slump, and then it rises again. So it's very important to think about it from an emotional perspective. So let me tell you about kind of 2 studies. So if you have ever, had to go before a judge to be sentenced for a crime, hopefully that was not the case, and hopefully it'll never be the case. But let's say you commit a crime and then you have your sentencing hearing. You want your sentencing hearing in the morning. You do not want it after 1 o'clock because they've done studies, and when judges sentence people after 1 o'clock, they do more time. They do more time. So that's impact stages of the day. So another example. So when you get over the age of 45, you're going to have to get a colonoscopy. So the new recommendation now is 45, not 50. So let's say you turn 46 years old and you were saying, no, I don't want to do this colonoscopy, but I got to do it now. So you want to make sure is that you schedule your colonoscopy for the morning, because they've done something that's called polyp detection rates. So when they do a colonoscopy, they're looking for polyps, which are growth, and the growth could be benign or malignant / cancerous. And what they have found is after 1 o'clock, gastroenterologist, board certified gastroenterologist, polyp detection rate is lower. That doesn't mean you don't have polyps. It means they just can't find them as well. Why? Because they can't focus during that stage of the day. So you really want to try to make sure that you get early morning appointment, not during the afternoon slump. So those are some other points to remember in terms of stages of the day. Now, this one is called an ultraradian rhythm. So this is kind of the pace by which you work within a given period of time. So this is ideally the way that you should work based upon how we are wired genetically as humans. So we can actually be involved in an activity for about 90 minutes. And optimally, although all of us can't do optimally we need about 20 minutes of rest. Then we come back again at 90 minutes. Then we need 20 minutes of rest. Because like the rising and the setting of the sun, birds chirping and not chirping, flowers coming in and out, those same rhythms apply to us because we're part of nature. And technology is not changing that. So for you, it may not be feasible to do 20 minutes, but I would argue that you clearly could do 1 to 2 minutes. So maybe you do 60, 90 minutes and take a break 1 to 2 minutes. 60, 90 minutes, take a break, do 1 to 2 minutes. So in the chat, what I'd like you to do is someone tell me how many minutes are there in a day. So in the chat, if you'll kindly type in how many minutes are there in a day. And I'll tell you why I'm asking that question in a moment. So anybody, just type in how many minutes in a day. Don't look it up either. No responses?
Let's see.
With the first one, so Erica DJ got it correct. So Erica, so that's fantastic. It is. It's 1,440 minutes in a day. So all I'm recommending is this, is maybe you're working, you do 60 to 90 minutes. You pause and take a break for 1 to 2 minutes. And maybe you do that 10 times in a day. So if you do it 10 times in a day, that's 10 to 20 minutes. So people might say to me, hey, Marty, you think I've got 10 minutes to sit up here and pause and do a micro break for 10 minutes? Do you know how stressed out I am? Do you know all the demands that are on me? Then what I'm going to say to them is, I'm not sure, but I do know there's 1,440 minutes in a day. And maybe you don't have 10 minutes out of 1,440 minutes in a day. But I would argue you do. Maybe it's not important, but you definitely got 10 minutes out of 1,440 minutes in a day. So I would strongly encourage you is to have that pause, 1 or 2 minutes. So I was working with the group and then someone asked the question. They said, oh, I started doing that 1 to 2 minute thing that you were talking about. So I go from one work task to another work task. And I said, well, I'm glad you are pausing from one thing, but you shouldn't go from one work task to another work task. And then a guy said, what about, can I get on Facebook? I said, as long as it doesn't stress you out. If you get stressed out on Facebook, then that's not a rest. So you want to do something that decreases your stress and is non-work related. We're just talking 10 minutes out of 1,440 minutes, maybe 1 or 2 minutes at a time. You got the time. If it's not important, just be honest, say it's not important. But don't make it be important later on. Try to prioritize it now. So some of you may be familiar with this technique called the Pomodoro Technique. It's named after a tomato because the guy named Ciricelli is an Italian, and he had this fascination with Pomodoros, and he had a Pomodoro stopwatch. So he came up with the Pomodoro Technique. If it had been an apple or orange, it would have been the apple technique. So this is what he suggests. Identify your task for the day and set a timer for 25 minutes. And then you work until the timer goes off. Now he says take a 5-minute break. So for a lot of you, it's like, oh, no way in the world, I can't do 5 minutes. So maybe it's a 1 or 2 minute break. And he says after every 4th break, take a longer break, which I would agree with as well. Because when you work in this fashion, you are working with the way we are wired as humans. And what you will find, initially you got to trust this, but after about, give yourself about a month. After about a month, you ask yourself this question. Does it seem like I have more time? Am I at greater ease? Am I at more flow? Am I a little bit nicer to be around? And am I getting more things done? Am I less stressed? And I would predict that for the vast majority of you, not everybody, because everything doesn't work for everybody, you will respond yes. But if you try this for at least a month, a lot of times what people do is, yeah, I'm gonna try that. So they try it one day. And if it doesn't work, it's like, I'm done with that. One day is not trying. All right, so I'm gonna pause there and see if there's any comments, questions, any ways that I can be helpful for the piece about the Pomodoro effect, the ultraradian rhythms, as well as stages of the day.
I don't see anything in the chat yet, but I do want to say I'm so glad that you addressed earlier that you cannot catch up on sleep. I am guilty, and I tell people like on the weekend, I'm gonna catch up on rest, and then I'll get everything that I missed in the previous days. And
You can't do it. Yep.
thanks for letting me know.
Oh, no, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, I wish you could. And someone says Monica Yellow raised hand.
Yeah, I'll unmute Monica. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Okay, Monica, you can go ahead.
Monica, you there?
Monica, you can go ahead.
Maybe she hit it accidentally.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you
perfectly.
hear me? I'm so
Yes.
sorry. I hit that on accident. I didn't have a question. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. Yep. But if you do, well, we're here. All right.
Okay.
All right. So now let's go to chronotypes. So there are 3 types. So you have the morning lark, and then you have the dove, which is called intermediate, and the night owl. So about 15% of the population are larks and 15% are owls, and the 70% are intermediates. But a chronotype is not your personality. It's not a preference. It's not a trait. It's genetically determined. Because 3 Nobel Prize laureates won the Nobel Prize about 10 years ago because they discovered the clock gene. So you can no more change your chronotype than you can change your eye color. Okay? So you just have to accept the fact that it is what it is. Okay? And you really want to acknowledge and recognize it. And as long as you're not fighting against your chronotype, life will go a whole lot smoother, sleep and other things. But if you're working against your chronotype, then that's not the case. So if you shoot me an email at martym@depaul.edu, then I can send you a relatively quick assessment. So just answer the questions, and then there's 1 score. And then just send me the score back, and then I'll send you a customized report stating what your chronotype is. And then based upon your chronotype, what are some ways to kind of lessen stress and enhance your performance? So just, shoot that to me. But I'm not going to get to it tonight because I'm an early morning person, but I'll get to it tomorrow morning. But you can send it to me tonight, but I probably won't respond tonight. Right, so key takeaway. Sync your schedule and tasks with your chronotype and time of day to boost performance and lower stress and frustration. And give yourself about a month to do that. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about this notion of deep work. So deep work in contrast to kind of surface work. And what deep work requires concentration and focus. It requires deliberation and discernment. It requires reflection, attention to detail, attention to tasks. And in general, for most of us, we cannot be interrupted. Because the average person, if we are interrupted when engaged in deep work, it can take 10 to 20 minutes to get back into that state. So you really want to protect that time as much as possible. And you also want to make sure the deep work is done at the optimal time for you. So for most people, it's going to be upon awakening, regardless of when you wake up, for the next 5 or 6 hours. So checking email is not deep work. However, for some people, they check the email at the beginning because they just want to clear their head and make sure there's nothing urgent in there. They may be a little bit anxious if they don't check it, that's fine. But then you want to make sure you get back to the deep work. So I would strongly encourage you to take a look at your schedule and really categorize your tasks. So which tasks are deep work? Which tasks are more kind of administrative? And then for those that are deep work, push them when you're at your biological best. When you're at your biological best. So for tomorrow, I have 3 tasks that are deep work. I have to finish up on this IT strategic planning process, formulating strategic plans. That's deep work, it's a lot of thinking. I have to finish up 1 article, and that's a lot of thinking because it's still in the writing stages. And then I also have to read through a contract, so that's very detailed. So all of those are deep work activities that I'm going to do tomorrow morning. I wouldn't do any of them tonight, because if I did any of them tonight, it would take literally 2 times longer. I would make mistakes, I would make errors, I would experience a sense of frustration. Now, what I would do tonight, because I'm still in a recovery period, is I may work on a slide deck or a PowerPoint. I may work on a graphic. I may sit back and think about, is there a different way to do something? I may, read something that really stretches my mind. So again, I'm very intentional, not just about what is my to-do list. So we call them to-do, which is activity, but I add the dimension of when do I do those things on the to-do list, and very intentional about that. So these are the 4 rules of deep work. So build rituals and routines. So, the ritual could be you wake up, maybe you stretch, maybe you brush your teeth, maybe you get a cup of coffee, maybe you walk 5 minutes, whatever it is. So you definitely want to have some rituals and routines. And you want to train your mind. So by training your mind is making sure as much as possible, I reserve focused times to engage in deep work. And you want to be very selective about digital media, particularly for social media, because you can begin and then all of a sudden 2 hours later, you kind of like find yourself still on it. So you just want to be very selective about any type of social media and limit shallow work at the wrong time. And you may not be able to completely limit it because your job and the task involves some shallow work. So make sure you're not doing the shallow work at the wrong time. I do the shallow work during my afternoon slump. That's when I do it because it's low stakes, it's low consequences. It needs to be done. It's somewhat important, but I don't need to be at my biological best to do shallow work. I do for deep work. So ultimately, what I'm focusing on is the possible you, and really kind of sit back and reflect on this presentation and say, what do I do well? What have I been doing that I'm proud of? And you want to begin from a place of appreciation for what you're doing well, and appreciation of all the things that you're doing correctly, and then build upon that base, and then maybe select 1 or 2 things that you might change. So in selecting 1 or 2 things you might change, you want to set a goal. And then you want to make a plan. And then ultimately, you got to get to the work. Now, stick to it. I'm going to show you a number in a moment that relates to the stick to it. Then you'll reach your goal. And then hopefully you'll find the benefits of that and some satisfaction from that. So I put up here 66 days. So maybe out loud or in the chat, what does 66 days have to do with behavior change? Anybody? What does 66 days have to do with behavior change? Anybody? I'll tell you. So 66 days is the average number of days that it takes to start a new behavior, stop an old behavior, or modify a behavior. 66 days, a little bit over 2 months. So you really want to make sure and I would be safe, give yourself 3 months. 3 months. Because in 3 months, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if you give yourself anything less than 66 days or 3 months, you haven't really tried. So just remember that if you decide to make any changes. Behavior change takes time. Fewer changes, the better. So you don't want to try to change 3 things at one time. Maybe 1 is best, maybe 2 at the most. All right. So I noticed that there's some questions here.
Yeah, we have some in the chat and the Q&A.
Okay, so the white noise machine. So what do you think of using white noise or environmental sound? So white noise machines are definitely something that you want to use. And then also they have these acoustic panels as well, which is I suggested to that client that on their bedroom wall where the neighbors are, is first try a white noise machine. If that doesn't work, try the Bose headsets that are noise canceling if you can actually sleep in them. If that doesn't work, then try the acoustic panel, but they definitely work. People also find them to be very comforting because there's this constant noise as well, but in a good way. The next one is there an ideal temperature range for the room you're sleeping in? There is. Is there a negative impact of wearing earplugs? Ideal temperature is between 66 and 68 degrees, so a little bit cool. And with regard to wearing earplugs, there's no downside to it unless maybe you roll over and you can get maybe a little impacted wax or it's discomforting, but there's no negative to it. But if you are listening to TV with the earplugs, then remember those 7 times that the volume is going to go up. What do you think about taking naps? So with regard to naps for most people are fantastic things to do. You want to limit a nap to no more than about 40 minutes. So limit it to 40 minutes. And you also want to make sure you're not taking a nap at least 6 hours for when you intend to go to sleep. So if you intend to go to sleep at 10, don't take a nap after 4. All right. And let's see what else. Oh, Fitbit device for a sleep score. So Fitbits are great tools for tracking, but Fitbits aren't necessarily great tools with regard to helping you get more sleep, fall asleep faster, but they're great for tracking, but not necessarily for changing sleep behavior. And how do things like melatonin and Ambien affect sleep? So melatonin is a naturally produced hormone. So when it turns dark, there's a gland called the pineal gland that's going to release melatonin, and that will initiate sleep. And you can get melatonin. Melatonin is over the counter, but you want to make sure you take melatonin at the right time. Most people decide to take melatonin when they're right in the bed or after they can't fall asleep, but it takes 2 hours to metabolize. So if you want to fall asleep at 10, you got to take it about 8. But if you take melatonin and then you pull this out, you might as well not take melatonin because you're confusing your body. Ambien has to be prescribed medication. So in general, I would say stay away from prescribed medications, particularly on a long-term basis, because they do work, but they don't work forever. Because you ultimately want to develop good sleep behaviors and habits and beliefs such that you don't have to rely upon, become psychologically dependent on Ambien. You also want to stay away from what's called benzodiazepines because they can become physiologically addictive, not just psychologically dependent. And how extreme is the collective effect of pandemic? So with regard to COVID-19, the pandemic, overall, more people are dreaming and more people are remembering their dreams. You have about half the population that's sleeping more. You have half the population that's not sleeping as well. So the only thing that's really constant with the pandemic is more dreaming, but some people are sleeping more. And a lot of that, the studies are coming out, it's attributed to remote work. Because if you don't have a 3-hour commute a day and you don't have to, like get dressed, just dress from the, top up, not bottom down, then you have more time. And then also people are finding that they're a little bit more aligned with their chronotype and stages of the day if their job allowed it. So that's about the pandemic. For sending chronotypes, do we find it? No. So just for the chronotype, shoot me an email. I'm going to send you a PDF document, and then you just email me back the one number. And then once you email me back the one number, then I'm going to send you either your early morning, your intermediate, or your night owl report. So that's the way that works. And I think
it's a few more questions.
A few more. So
Yes.
What about a job like accounting? You expect to work 12 hours, 2 to 3 days. How can you, for the wind down. So for the wind down, you want to find, it could be 20 or 30 minutes. So find something that calms you, that grounds you. It could be reading, it could be light TV, it could be walking, it could be exercising, it could be crocheting, could be listening to music, it could be praying, could be meditating. So you may want to experiment with a number of things, is to bring you from 100 down. So remember that gear shift? That's where the wind down comes. So clearly there are ways to wind down, even if you are an accountant and have a demanding schedule. And
One last question.
Okay, what's that?
Someone said that every time that they wake up, they use the restroom and it takes them like 45 minutes to an hour to fall back asleep. They put an eye mask on to block out light. Could this be the cause?
No, unless the eye mask, there's irritating your face and it's itchy. If that's not the case, it's not the eye mask. So what you need to do is, and try this for 7 days, do that 20 to 30 minute rule. So if you don't fall asleep within 20 minutes, get out the bed, get out the bedroom, make sure it stays dark. Take that eye mask off when you're walking because you want to fall. And then get in that dark room and then do something that's non-stimulating. Don't go back into the bedroom in the bed until you feel sleepy. And remember, I told you the difference between sleepy and tired. Try that for a week and see what happens. But here's the key. Don't expect it to work. Because if your expectation is too high, you place a demand. If the demand's not met, you get frustrated. And if you get frustrated, you're not relaxed, you're stimulated.
Dr. Martin, this was an amazing webinar. Thank you so much for talking to us today. And thank you to all of our alumni who logged on. Again, this recording will be made available within like a week. Thanks again.
And please reach out if I can be helpful in any way. As you can tell, I really love sleep. So if I can be helpful in any way, please just let me know.
Yes. Thank you again.
All right.
You and everyone have a great evening.
All right. Y'all take care. Good night.